Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Outsider. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we're picking up at the crime scene that got discovered last episode. Obviously, the clothes that are connected to Terry. But what's interesting is, obviously, they end up finding these substances on the clothes. At first, it's kind of like, oh, is this supposed to be semen? But then later on, it's like, we don't know what it is because they literally ran through like, oh, could it be dead mortar, or it could be this, could it be that? It's like nothing came up yet. Because even at one point, it looked like it was a sock, and he lifted it up, and it was stiff, and then it kind of ended up breaking. That's why I was like, is that a sock or is that actually like skin or something? I think it was just a pure sock, but I'm like, okay. So, Eunice sits down with Ralph and kind of breaks down some of the evidence. It's like, all right, so we got some fingerprints, because like there's a belt buckle that's like, okay, so we saw in the video when Terry was at the train station that he changed his clothes at that strip club, and his belt buckle looks like what he was wearing. Well, a lot of people could have that, but his fingerprints on it. But things get weird. Okay, so there's certain fingerprints that look like straight up just Terry's fingerprints, and there are other fingerprints that are broken up. These said fingerprints are like, and based on like people who've been analyzing them, these look like the fingerprints of an 80 or 90-year-old, which starts begging the question with this whole situation. I brought it up before. I'm thinking like, oh, skinwalker type of situation, but then it's like, is it a situation of like, whatever this thing is, does it age? Is it stuck? Like, does it actually kind of age like a normal person, but can disguise itself as Terry? Because it's able to keep the fingerprints the same, or whatever this thing is pretending to be Terry. It can keep the fingerprints the same. Yet it makes you wonder, why are certain fingerprints straight up Terry while others are older Terry? I guess it's because, like, depending on... Well, because it actually kind of gets into some stuff, because I'm going to be super all over the place with this. But obviously, like, Jessa's kind of have more, like, nightmares, but she doesn't say they're nightmares. Her mom's kind of saying they're nightmares. So Glory brings over Ralph and his wife to kind of have a sit down and talk about the nightmares and everything. And obviously, like, wasn't really getting anywhere with Ralph, because Glory wanted him to, like, ease her mind, like, you play along with this only enough to kind of shut her down in her delusions and, you know, let her know that it's just a nightmare. But his wife Jeannie's kind of actually does sit down and be like, all right, you know, kind of saying that the more you fight it, the more you try to tell your child it was a dream, it was a nightmare, the less likely to believe you. But if you sit down, kind of listen to what they have to say and kind of work it out, either they'll kind of be like, oh, recognize your rationale in it, and it'll kind of go away, or they'll just kind of get bored of like you trying to explain it. So Jeannie ends up talking to Jessa, and she says the thing of like, she's seen the person 4 times, the man 4 times. One, he looked exactly like her dad. Twice, the second time, looked somewhat like her dad, but he was blurred. That's what I'm thinking. It's with that fingerprint. Whatever this thing is, it like whatever looking like Terry was starting to wear off, and so the fingerprints started, or maybe it's supposed to be like the fingerprints are like that because when it first started looking like Terry, it's like the older fingerprints are what were first, and then as it slowly adapted more into being Terry came the other fingerprints. Or it is the thing of like, as it was, well, no, because it has to be the form, it has to be a thing of like, it was like slowly sliding into the skin of Terry in whatever shape or form that is. Like I said, we don't know the full scope. Like I said, I've thrown out last episode Skinwalker, and I kind of brought it up earlier, but at the same time, we don't still know the full scope of whatever this thing is, because they ended up finding similar fingerprints, and they found Terry's fingerprints and this and that, and there was a set of fingerprints they couldn't tell, but it turned out that it was more of those broken up fingerprints from old Terry. So that's why I'm thinking like it had to still be in the adjustery period, where like maybe the new skin didn't fit 100% well, so like fingerprints kind of got a little slighted. It's almost like the skin was kind of like a glove, so it wasn't on perfectly enough, and so the fingerprints were a little messed with. So that's kind of my thought process behind it. So, but obviously it leaves Eunice and Ralph being like, we still don't know what the hell we're dealing with in this situation. So there's that side of things. But then, like, they talking to Glory and, you know, the family's representative, Howie, they end up working with him and his kind of, you know, his dude that handles stuff for him, Alec, and they suggest another party kind of get involved in this, and her name is Holly. I guess she's someone that they kind of contract from time to time. She's a private investigator, and it turns out she's very good at what she does. But it does seem interesting because it seems like, well, the thing is, we don't quite know what Holly's thing is, because it seems like her mind works in a very interesting way. It seems like there's elements of like OCD, because it's kind of like she's like, oh, you're sitting in my spot, where it's like she has to sit in a very particular spot. Like once she's kind of designated something as her spot, it's like, that's kind of my spot. Like it kind of messes up her rhythm of things, and just kind of, I guess it's kind of like almost like an alarm going off in her. Like I said, a little bit of OCD of like something just kind of, she can't compute, she won't work right if she's not in the right spot. But then we kind of, Ralph and Alex spend some time with her. Alec obviously knows, is crossed paths with Holly before, but it seems like the fact is that she can come up with facts. She's looking at cars outside of her window, was able to kind of break down stuff like that. But then she kind of starts bringing up stuff like doppelgangers, and I was like, oh, I didn't even think about the whole doppelganger angle, which, to be fair, I'm not that well versed in doppelgangers. I've never actually seen the movie Us, which I know that kind of deals in that regard, but I like the doubles and everything, so it's like, okay, because I was wondering if they never went down the twin route. They had never talked about it, but it's like, no, we looked into the whole twin route thing. So I was like, okay, that was something that was never brought up, but it was something that they secretly handled in between things. I like noting that they did go down that route. They did think about that, because I mean, that is the most rational explanation. But obviously Holly's like, well, if this is a doppelganger, the fact of the matter, like she was kind of going in on it a little bit, but then Ralph was like, oh, what were you talking about, if? And she's like, yeah. He's like, you said if. And she's like, yeah. And he's like, well, the fact is, if we're kind of going down that realm, then I won't accept anything kind of like supernatural or nothing like that. And she's like, then you won't, nothing abnormal. And then she's like, then you won't accept me because she's abnormal. Like the things that like science, or nothing that can be understood or proven type of situation. And she's like, I fall in that category, because her parents thought that they could fix her, but it turns out whatever, but Ralph was like, they didn't let you be yourself. Like whatever her situation is, they looked at it as something that needed to be fixed, rather than just accepting her as she was, because her situation was different. Like her, because she even talked about it. It's like, she can tell you the date that what day the first is going to land on 204 days from now, of 204 years from now, in a blink of an eye, kind of like faster than a computer could tell you. But she would have to look at a calendar to tell you what the day is. So like her brain structure isn't like, it's different, her brain works in a different capacity than most people's brains. That's kind of what the whole point she was trying to make. So whatever the case may be, Holly is looking into Terry's side of things, especially related to this whole Dayton trip and everything. So what was interesting, and I like, it was an interesting thing when she walked back, where like she talks about the fact that she was like saying that Ralph drank more than he doesn't really like drinking a lot, and he drank more just to make her feel more comfortable. And she's like, thank you. And then she was walking away, like when she was going back to her room, she grabs onto the stairs, because I think probably thinking about her parents and stuff like that, reliving that stuff when she was younger, it kind of triggered her a little bit, I think, and it kind of made her kind of have to take a deep breath to kind of, I don't know, like if it's just that or something else, but whatever the case may be. It also seemed like there's like religious, like kind of almost like totems that she keeps around, because like even when she was investigating Terry, like when she was there where the family was staying at and everything, she set up all these totems and stuff. I'm like, I guess it's part of her process, the full scale of everything. Like I said, we still don't really understand, what Holly does. But, it's like, obviously we can see it, we were told, but we can also see she's actually really good at her job, But even this, I can tell we're only getting like the first steps, because obviously we're still tiptoeing our way through, this investigation. I feel like that thing about Ralph not liking to drink much, I think that's probably supposed to be parallels to like the whole thing of like how, well, because obviously he was talking to, the therapist he kind of has to go see. And I like him being like, oh, this is straight out of the book. And he's like, what are you talking about? Well, the fact of the matter is, when you have a bad actor, when you have a criminal in the box, when they kind of like are just kind of like, oh, done answering your questions, because it's like, yeah, I've got you, you just sit there silently and you wait. And eventually the silence kind of gets in them and they start talking. They end up talking about stuff they didn't mean to talk about, because they get a little nervous, because it's like, why are you still sitting here? Why are you not saying anything? Then they start kind of going off the script, because a lot of times they'll have oh, I already got these answers lined up of what I want to say, and they kind of fall off that script, and it's like, boom, you got him. And so he was kind of comparing himself to that. And it seems, I don't know whether he did that on purpose or not, where he kind of just immediately starts talking to the therapist afterwards, because the therapist is like, so, kind of asking about the marriage and everything. That's why I'm like, you saw it coming, but I guess like he was like, well, since you're already doing that, I'm gonna go ahead and go with it, because I guess it's like I got nothing to kind of over talk about. Maybe that's what he was, is like, maybe in all the stuff he was responding was kind of his go-to, like, oh, stop powered answers. I don't know, because he's talked about some other stuff like that I was surprised about. Well, for example, the fact is, he talked about the fact is that him and his wife, him and Jeannie were in a very tough spot after Derek died. Like, there was a 6-month period. It's like, oh yeah, like, I didn't know whether we were going to make it or not, but we did. And it's like, oh, what caused that? It's like the death of the child. And it's like, it could go either way. Like, the marriage could fall apart, or we could come back together stronger. And the therapist was like, yeah, I've seen it kind of go both ways. And it's like, how were you during that time? And because obviously it's something Ralph's not talking about, but obviously, like, he was drinking a lot, kind of like trying to drown his sorrows. Because like, there's no like be all cure for that. Like, when you've had a tragic loss like that, there's no like fixing it. And so there were two people fighting in a bar, and obviously he tried to break it up, but he kind of got caught in a scuffle of it, and he kind of started beating the crap out of one of the guys, and he went back to drinking. I think that's kind of the parallel they're trying to make, where it's like, he doesn't necessarily like drinking, because the last time he kind of started drinking like that wasn't the best thing, because he was going through, a traumatic time, losing their son. So I think that's kind of what that was kind of, implying, or maybe that's kind of treating those as like two separate things. Maybe in general he didn't like to drink, but at that time he drank a lot just to compensate for the fact that he was, feeling either way, Then there's that whole situation with Jack, which I'm not sure what to make of, because at first he was kind of pissy, because it's like, oh, I got to show up there. It's like an hour drive away, and by the time I get out there to the crime scene, they're literally all going to be done anyway. He stops by the strip club, kind of causes some issues yet again. But then I start thinking, like, is that actually Jack? Could it actually be something pretending to be Jack? Because I don't know, because it seemed like he's fine one minute, and then he just has like major mood swings, but maybe that's just kind of like whatever he's dealing with right now. But I'm like, oh, maybe that actually is him. I don't know what to make of it. It's just interesting, because it's like, obviously Terry, or rather fake Terry, went to that strip club too. It was part of like, oh, here I am. I'm totally the criminal. I'm the total bad guy that's behind this whole Frankie thing. So that's why I'm like, I don't know what to make of it, that he's actually at the same strip club multiple times too. It could just be like, that's kind of his spot. Probably not too much to think about. Regardless, he gets to the crime scene, and I like I said, I was still thinking like maybe there's two different Jacks running around, but it doesn't seem like, because he's kind of a little angry and he's pissing everywhere. So he goes to investigate, but someone's there, or rather something's there. But what was interesting though is when he was turned around, he kind of heard something or felt something, and then like he started feeling something back of his neck. I was like, oh, was he getting cut? Could remember Terry had a cut on his hand. Which now begs the question, is that supposed to be... Well, no, because I feel like if that the one that got cut had to be the real Terry, because it was the fake Terry, like I feel like not unless fake Terry showed up to kind of take over real Terry's spot while he was away, and then... No, I don't know. I'm like I said, I'm thinking too much about this whole situation. It has to be a thing of like, it had to be real Terry. That's why I'm thinking like, check his hand to see if there was any like mark for him. I mean, it's been a while, so maybe it's healed up, but maybe there would be remnants of that scar, you would think. But in the grand scheme of things, it's like his situation is different, because like I said, like Terry got cut, but it seems like for him it's like ended up something back of his neck. So I was like, oh, he got cut, but it's like later when we see it, it's like a rash. It looks like he got burned on his neck, and I'm like like maybe it's just me looking too much into it. It almost looked like a hand, like in a sense of like if you grab someone by the back of their neck, how your hand would fit around their neck, like your thumb on like the left side of their neck and the rest of your fingers resting on the other side. It kind of looked like that. But like I said, I think I might have been looking too much into it, but then like obviously Jack's kind of in pain. He's drinking, he's passing out, but he says, oh, make it stop. And it's like, so is this part of like the copying process? But the way he's talking later on, he's like, I'll do whatever you want to. So it's like, so is this different from the Terry situation? Is it kind of a thing of like, rather than kind of copying Terry's like skin and all that, maybe this thing has other abilities, so it's not or maybe this is part of the process. I don't know, because like I said, I feel like it would be doing exactly like it did with Terry and cutting him, because it seemed like that was what was connected, or at least that seemed like that was a through line. Circling back to kind of the whole Jessica thing really quickly, it's interesting because like I swear they noted the first and second time she saw him, the fourth, but never really brought up the third time. Because like she had said, like I said, the second time it looked like her dad, but it was almost like someone smushed his face and like blurred it. But by the fourth time, it's like, oh no, that's not my dad. And it's like, oh, he looked like he was aching, which kind of lends itself more to the whole 80 or 90-year-old thing. but it seemed like the whole point was to give a message to Ralph to stop. And she's like, it doesn't scare me. He doesn't scare me. He just makes me mad. Because he's saying all these like hurtful things trying to make me cry. And that's why I'm wondering, like, why is this thing so obsessed with Jessa? Like, why not appear to anyone else? Why not appear to her big sister? Like, why her? Is it because she's at the perfect age? Or like, is it kind of fulfilling something that, like I said, it seems like whatever that thing is, it seems like it feeds off of despair, sadness, and death. Because hence everything related to Frankie's family, like obviously his brother, his mom, then his brother, then everything with his dad. Like it seemed like every time it would be nearby. Like I said, I don't know whether it causes that or it kind of gets the feeling that that's coming and it kind of gets off on it or something. I don't know what to kind of make of that. So I'm wondering, is that what it's trying to do to her, but it's not necessarily working? Because for her, it's like, I'm not even sad, I'm just angry. And it's like, well, if he's got a problem, if you ever see him again, tell him to come my way if he got something to say. And she's like, I don't think you want that because he's promising that there's going to be something bad that happens if you don't stop. It's like, I don't think I'm the one that's supposed to be scared. You are. And I'm like, okay, what the hell does that mean? There's, like I said, a lot of questions. We learned some interesting things on Holly's investigation. Obviously, there's no tapes of the parking lot because they get deleted like every 5 days. So anyone who could have stolen that van will never get to know because of surveillance. But I don't know what it is. That security guard seems shifty. I don't know what it is. Him being like, oh, let's exchange cars. It could have been like just simple pleasantries, but it's like, I don't know. It rubbed me the wrong way because even like Holly would just kind of walking away. She looked back and I'm like, I don't know. Something about him. Like the moment it seemed like he got a little cagey at one point. I'm like, I don't know. Something don't seem right about that security like guy. We'll see. But obviously she goes to the nursing home or whatever that Terry's dad was at. And obviously, like, the nurse kind of goes like, oh, you're a reporter, which she's not, but it's because she started asking so many questions. So, a lot of interesting things. Like, obviously, reporters have been by, but it's like, the lady talked about Terry without really knowing that he was dead. But the fact of the matter is, it's like, which, Ralph was kind of like, well, it's a small town, so why would... But I feel like considering everything you would think that would kind of come up, I don't know. I mean, I guess you don't find everything out, like when things are kind of very local news, you wouldn't see them kind of become statewide things depending on how big it is. But it's just kind of like, I don't know what to make of that. But then she made a point of like pointing out like, but cops came to interview the dad. But it's like, why? It seemed almost like it had nothing to do with the investigation, or maybe it did. Because it almost seemed like Ralph wasn't Ralph seemed like he knew, but he didn't know. Like I didn't know what to really make of that. For her, she's like, and I thought it was kind of interesting when she was like, I know I shouldn't have called you because I didn't have anything, but I just needed to hear the voice of someone on my side. And I'm like, I guess because she is kind of treated kind of like an outsider, kind of weirdo, so it's kind of like, despite everything, hearing someone that's kind of on her side and got her back, I think kind of calms her, because I guess just kind of trauma created from her parents kind of looking at her like she was different and she needed to be fixed. So I think it's kind of compensation in that regard. So, and then there's also that other side of the episode. I kept being like, okay, how is this all going to connect? Can we follow that prison? There's a dude who's sharpening one of his lenses. The other dude pulling a shank out of his leg. I was like, that stuff kind of roasts me. Like stuff underneath the skin just, legitimately makes my skin crawl. But I was trying to figure out what the connection all that was. Well, it turns out Holly was looking into this, and it turns out there was a murder of 2 girls. It was a pretty violent situation. I was like, okay, so it seems remnant of Terry's situation to a certain extent. And it turns out it was a guy that was like an orderly or whatever at a medical facility. But I forgot what the exact wording was. But my mind of me was like, did he work at the home where Terry's dad is? Is there actually going to be a connection to that? Because part of me was starting to wonder, like, is this like just... Is the guy, because the guy in there, he gets a letter saying child killer. So I'm like, okay, so was he another Terry where he was kind of like the evidence kind of shows that it was him, but other evidence kind of contradicted it. Sorry, I can't speak. I'm wondering if it's like, that's why I'm kind of wondering if Terry wasn't the first. That probably over the years this has happened more and more, but obviously like that's why I'm wondering like whether that guy was hired like, you know, someone paid him on to be on the inside to kill home dude, you know, with the glass, the guy who's accused of killing those two daughters, those two little girls, or whether it was, I don't know, because it didn't seem like he was personally motivated. It seemed like maybe he was kind of hired to do, or maybe he's just a guy that's like, oh, I hate child, you know, because obviously, once again, that's the whole thing about prisoners. I mean, once again, like I brought it up previously, because obviously Terry was kind of getting some of that. It seemed like just Terry was just in a different situation, and this guy, unfortunately, like the guards are kind of in on it because they're like, oh, this is a terrible guy, like get rid of him. But before the other guy could kill him, he had slit his own throat with a gun. I thought he was going to use it to defend himself, but it's like, no, he killed himself beforehand. So it's like, okay. So I think it is kind of like almost like history repeating itself. Like, I think his situation went down before Terry's, obviously, but it's like, well, maybe not. I would assume so, but it's like, so like I said, I think there's going to be a long list of like similarities in the case. I think like Holly's going to look into that and probably bring that back to Ralph to be like, yeah, there's definitely something going on here. And like I said, whatever the hell is going on with Jack, I don't know what to make of that. Quite a few, you know, missing pieces to this whole puzzle to kind of really try and put it together. But I'm curious to kind of find out where all this ends up taking us going forward. Like I said, I think we're obviously each episode we're learning a little bit more. The story kind of expands more because, like I said, we're at this point where it seems like there were others. You know, we'll see whether or not that is the case or not. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.